You know, there's a text out there translated from Tibetan that's basically one of the most detailed roadmaps to advanced tantric practice ever released to the public. It promises to unlock these incredible states of consciousness. So today, we're going to dive into what makes this text so powerful and, in our modern world, what makes it so uniquely dangerous. So the man who wrote these instructions was Shardza Tashi Gyaltsen, and the story goes that at the end of his life, back in 1934, he achieved the ultimate goal of these very practices. He literally dissolved his physical body into pure light. So the instructions we're about to look at, they come from a source whose own life ended in a way that just completely transcends our normal reality.
And that's the thing. That's the catch. Those secret instructions, well, they're not secret anymore. Anyone can find them, anyone can read them. But what happens when you take these incredibly potent techniques and you just lift them out of their original context? Away from the teacher, away from the culture, away from the years and years of preparation? Well, you're left with something that can cause serious, lasting damage.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the incredible appeal of these teachings, but also the stark warnings that come with them. Then we'll get into the specific risks to your body, and after that, the even trickier dangers to your mind. We'll explore the shocking final practice of this path, and then we'll try to figure out what it all means to have this kind of power without any of the old safety nets.
Okay, let's dive right in. To really get a handle on the danger here, you first have to understand the promise. You have to understand why this is all so compelling in the first place.
So the core problem isn't that the text is fake. Actually, it's the opposite. The problem is that it's authentic. These are the real deal instructions. But their power was always contained within this whole system of personal guidance, really strict prerequisites, and constant supervision. Now, that container is just gone, and we're left with the raw volatile material inside. And these risks, they really fall into four main buckets. You've got direct medical dangers if you mess up the techniques. Then there are physical risks from some of the, well, invasive preparations. There are profound psychological risks that come from deliberately messing with your own consciousness. And finally, you have spiritual risks, the subtle ways the path itself can become the biggest trap. So let's jump into that first category, the body, and see how this ancient path can collide with modern physiology in some really, really harmful ways. Okay, so the foundation for almost everything on Shardza's text is a practice called Tsa-lung. The basic idea is that you use these very specific, often forceful, breathing techniques to move what they call wind or vital energy through your body's subtle channels. Get it right, and it can generate intense states of bliss and incredible clarity. It's really the engine that powers all the other more advanced stuff. Now, what's so wild here is that these aren't modern interpretations of the risks. These warnings are straight from Shardza himself. And he is incredibly specific. He says if you mess up the upward-moving wind, you could literally end up with brain pain or even lose the ability to speak. If your life force wind gets unstable, it can lead to rage, even insanity. And if the all-pervasive wind fails, paralysis.
And this is where it gets fascinating, because you can see how this ancient, pre-scientific language maps almost perfectly onto modern medical conditions. When Shardza warns about wind entering the heart, he's describing what a modern doctor would call an arrhythmia or severe autonomic dysfunction. The paralysis he talks about, that lines up perfectly with nerve compression from holding these extreme postures. And the intense breath holding, that can raise the pressure inside your skull to dangerous levels. These aren't just metaphors, they are real clinical outcomes.
Right. So as you go deeper, the prep gets more intense. For the sexual yoga practices, Shardza instructs men to perform an exercise that involves inserting a peeled plant sprout and later a copper or iron straw into their urethra to open up the channel. And after describing all this in detail, he offers this simple little reassurance. Don't worry, there is no harm.
Yeah. No. There is harm. A lot of it. I mean, performing that kind of self-instrumentation on your own body without any sterile equipment is practically a textbook way to cause a serious infection, scarring, and permanent injury. You're basically being advised to perform a medical procedure in a totally non-medical setting with zero safety protocols. For a modern person reading this, that one little line, don't worry, it might just be the most dangerous sentence in the whole book.
So it's crucial to get that the dangers here, they're not just physical, they are profoundly psychological. The very same practices designed to bring you ultimate insight can, if you don't have the right guardrails, lead you straight into total delusion.
49 days. Just let that number sink in. That's the length of one of the tradition's most intense practices, the dark retreat. That's 7 weeks, sealed in a room with absolutely zero light, all in an attempt to trigger a direct, unfiltered perception of reality. Now, within the traditional view, all the bizarre stuff that happens in there is part of the map. You see luminous visions, you have terrifying encounters with wrathful deities. It's all seen as a sign of progress. But look at it from a clinical perspective. What you're seeing are the known effects of prolonged sensory deprivation: vivid hallucinations, paranoia, and, for some people, a full-blown psychotic break. The tradition gives you a map to get through that territory. Without it, you're just completely lost in the dark.
And again, Shardza himself is crystal clear on this point. He flat out warns that anyone who tries this without years of foundational training, without hitting 21 very specific signs of readiness, they're just going to mistake their own mental projections for some kind of spiritual truth, and in his own words, become deluded like a crazy person.
There's also this other, more subtle spiritual trap, something Shardza calls conceptual hardening. It's what happens when you have a real, powerful experience, maybe of bliss or clarity, and you mistake that temporary state for the final goal. He uses this incredible metaphor. It's like a monkey that climbs a pine tree. The height it's reached is real, sure, but the panoramic view it thinks it has from up there, it's a total illusion. It's a kind of spiritual pride that becomes the biggest roadblock of all.
Okay, let's move to the absolute peak of these practices. This is where all the risks we've been talking about culminate in one final, frankly shocking technique that pushes consciousness to its absolute limit.
The practice is called Grong. It literally translates to dead entering. And it is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like: consciousness transference. The practitioner actually trains to eject their own mind, target a recently deceased body, and then transfer their consciousness into it to reanimate it. The final step is to make that transfer permanent and have your original body cremated. This was considered a secret teaching, even within the tradition itself.
Now, from a clinical standpoint, the training for this is basically a manual for inducing severe dissociation. The very act of practicing over and over again how to eject your sense of self from your body is a recipe for depersonalization, derealization, the total fragmentation of your identity. These aren't just spiritual ideas, they are recognized psychiatric conditions.
And Shardza's warning for what happens when this ultimate practice goes wrong is maybe the most profound understatement in the entire book. For someone who's not ready, he says, trying this will only be the cause for exhaustion. But the clinical reality behind that quiet little word exhaustion is almost certainly a catastrophic and irreversible collapse of the mind.
So, after going through all these incredible practices and their equally incredible risks, what's the real takeaway here? What's the bottom line?
The most important point is that this isn't an argument against the practices themselves. Their power, their effectiveness within their original context is exactly why they've been so carefully preserved for centuries. The problem isn't the power. The problem is having access to that power with absolutely no safety net. No teacher, no tradition, no culture there to catch you when you fall. And this leaves us with a really critical question for our time. As the most secret knowledge from ancient traditions becomes available with a single click, we all have to learn a new kind of literacy. When we come across a text like this, are we reading a path to enlightenment, or are we reading an exquisitely detailed blueprint for self-destruction? The text is the same. The difference is entirely in us.